Welcome back to Three's In. Bobo here. So in February 1976, I became the flight commander of O-Flight in the 25th Flying Training Squadron at Vance Air Force Base, T-38s. And I just loved it. I'd been at Vance for maybe a year. I'd only been on the line perhaps 9 months, but been a year at Vance, a little over. And when I got that tasking, I really loved it. Now, on the other side of that, I didn't have a clue what I was doing when I first walked into the flight commander's office, but I figured I'd figure it out, and I eventually did. My first class I had was led by a guy who was a complainer. Now, I didn't realize this at the beginning, and I'd like to take a moment here to differentiate between a complainer and a whiner. A complainer is more sophisticated than a whiner. A whiner tends to be a little bit immature. I guess a complainer would be a mature whiner. But be that as it may, that's what it was. He would come into my office and ask to talk to me about some aspect of student training, usually associated with one of his guys. His guys. They weren't his guys, they were my guys. Anyway. And at first I kind of acquiesced. I was willing to go along with the flow, and like I said, I was just getting my feet wet as far as becoming a flight commander. And so I spent quite a bit of time talking with him about student management, my perspective on it, my outlook on it, and so forth. And there was always an edge there. So we go through the program, and I was none too happy for him to come up for assignment night and kind of give him his wings and send him on his way. He was not a bad pilot. He was a good pilot. He was prior service. I can't remember where he came from. That's not germane to the story here. So we would meet to determine assignments. Usually you had the two flight commanders of the squadron and the squadron commander. So there's three from each squadron, the T-37 and T-38 squadron. And then we'd have the chief of academics show up, a lieutenant colonel. So we would meet and form a board. And during that board, we would determine who were going to come back as IPs and in what squadron, T-37s and T-38s. And so we'd sit there and shred that out. We also at that board determined who was FAR qualified, fighter attack reconnaissance. So it was quite an interesting drill during that, and a little bit of horse trading went on, and I enjoyed that too. Anyway, about 2 days before this assignment board for this class, this guy took it upon himself to just rip us apart in flight management on his student critique. Those things came in about, like I said, 2 days prior to the board meeting. And I sat in the office, I read that thing, and I went, you gotta be kidding me. He was going on and on about things like our hair, the IP's hair, our boots not being shined, favoritism this way or another, and just all kinds of garbage in there. And I thought, why, you little SOB. All the time, the hours I spent with him, and tell you what, that's like taking a piece of iron and hitting it with a hammer. I hardened after that. But be that as it may, I never let go to my mantra of firm but fair. I just got a lot more firmer. So I go down to this assignment board with this in my hip pocket. And more, I walk down to base ops. That's where they had it in the ops officers, the director of operations office, conference room. So I'm walking down there, and the more I'm walking, the more pissed off I'm getting. And when I got to that board meeting, I was on fire. So we're sitting there and we're throwing out names. And of course, we started with this guy. He was a class leader. And is this guy FAR qualified? You bet he is. So we went through that drill and named the other guys. Okay, who do we want to look at for IPs in the FAR group? And I said, well, I think we ought to look at this guy. And the T-37 guys loved him. They just loved him. From what I later learned, they kind of kissed his butt all the way through, and then he ran into me. and I wasn't into that. Anyway, so we got talking about it, and it was decided to bring him back then as a T-37 IP. And that's what he got. So assignment night comes, and they announce his name, and they said, "You're coming back to T-37s." The look on his face was priceless. And after the assignments were all passed out, he come walking up to me, and he said, "I think you had something to do with this, didn't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I kind of did." I said, "First lesson to learn is when you're a Jeep, don't screw with a tank." I said, "The second lesson I have is after listening to you complain throughout the 6 months you were in the flight and then reading your critique, I said, if you've got our problems so well identified here in Air Training Command, I think we ought to afford you the opportunity to come back right from the beginning and get us sorted out." He just turned around and walked off. And you might think that was the end of that, but it's not. He goes down to PIT, down at Randolph, and on the way back, he gets back, and a short time thereafter, maybe 2-3 weeks, he gets called into the commander's office and administered a welcome Article 15 for falsifying his travel voucher. Jesus Christ, falsifying a travel voucher. As it turns out, it was $29 is what it was. And he falsified that sucker for a few shekels, whatever they were. What a great way to start your career as a rated officer. And the problem is, he brought down 2 of his classmates, showing them how to fill out travel vouchers. Like I said, he was prior service, and they put their trust in him. At any rate, I didn't see much of him after that. I didn't have any need to, and didn't pay much attention to him like that. But we want to talk about integrity. Integrity in the Air Force is everything. And think of it as a crystal glass. Once you break it, you can't put it back together. We count on our wingmen. We count on our leaders having integrity. And I have no problem with that commander's administration of an Article 15 to that kid. He was, like I said, prior service. He should have known better. But he did know better. But for $29, good God, if you're going to forge it for a couple thousand. Anyway, still shake my head at that. I think back about how hard it was for me to get into pilot training, and the opportunity I was given. I wasn't going to screw it up for $29. Anyway, so that's what I have to tell you about that character. Now I'm going to go look for a barber, because I think I hear his ghost telling me I need a haircut. And before the base commander gets on my butt, I think it's the thing to do. With that, this Bobo, base gear, stop.